Why study apologetics?
Yeah, why?
Well, welcome to Connecting Point. I'm Sean.
And I'm Erika.
And today we're going to be talking about why study apologetics, but stay tuned, because at the end of this video we're going to be giving you guys some of our favorite data points for a particular topic that we discussed in the first video. Actually, I guess I discussed in the first video. So anyway, let's get started. Get into that, I want to talk a little bit more in this video, like the last video, on how we should use apologetics, the why, the methodology, because otherwise, if I just give you guys data, it's fairly useless if you don't know how to apply it. I think a good example of this is if you have you ever tried to hang a picture or painting with a nail, but you can't find a hammer, so you try to use something else?
There's a time when I cannot find appropriate tool, but that just sounds like a bad idea, and no, I haven't done that one.
Yeah, so I have, and I can tell you that it's a mess when you try to do it.
Oh my goodness.
I've tried to use sandals or sneakers, and that way if I hit my hand, it won't hurt. But of course, the problem with it is that, it doesn't work out well. So apologetics is like that in the sense that it's a tool to be used, but if you use it the wrong way, well, particularly the information in apologetics, the data. Mm-hmm. But if you apply it the wrong way or use it at the wrong time, it's totally ineffective. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to discuss basically some points about how to use it, why or when or who to approach, and some necessary skills, and then launch into giving our data points.
All right.
So the first part would be how to use it. Well, or maybe what I mean to say is why. Let me go there first. So why to use it would be for two reasons I can think of off the top of my head. Now, some people give like up to four.
Oh.
Yeah, but in my mind, I think of basic two fundamental reasons. And the first one is evangelism. Mm-hmm. Apologetics, to me, is really nothing more than kind of clearing the debris field, if you will. I'm thinking of a military illustration there. Or, if you were gardening, which is often an illustration used in the Bible. Mm-hmm. That if you had stones or weeds and you wanted to till the soil, you want to remove the stones and the weeds and prepare the ground. Mm-hmm. So apologetics, I think, is great for that. That when somebody's asking questions or maybe they have a desire to want to know why you believe what you believe, but it's genuine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right.
What about you? What do you think in terms of evangelism and apologetics?
Yes, I agree with both, and especially the latter one. Because as Japanese, when I was in Japan, it was rare to meet Japanese Christians. Unless you go to church, you meet them. But the percentage of Japanese Christian is so low, under 1%. It has been, it might be like 1%, but I think it's still under. And it has been for a long time. So, if people find out you are a Christian, some of them want to know, why are you one? It's so unusual, and you want to be able to give an answer.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, I just do, or I don't know. It's better to have good, reasonable answer for those questions, especially if people are genuinely asking why.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point, that we want to think about what the Bible says about it. And the word apologetics we actually get from a passage in, I believe it's 1 Peter, and it says, be ready always to give an answer of the reason of hope that's in you, right? And so we want to give that answer, but we need to remember when people ask why you're a Christian, not to tell them how we became a Christian. Sometimes we confuse the question or kind of mash them together in our minds, and we answer the wrong thing. So in the sense of being prepared to give that answer, make sure you are. Think about it, so that if somebody does ask you, you have that answer. But I guess there's another part to that too, which is sort of a parenthetical comment, which I'm famous for, so I'm going to make it anyway. And that is the idea that if you're going to do that as a Christian, your behavior needs to exemplify that. In other words, you want to be acting like a Christian. So when you're out in public, people, when they see that, they genuinely recognize that behavior is such that you're different. Not different because you're a snob or rude to other people, or not different in those kinds of ways, but different in the sense that you're behaving with love toward your fellow man and mankind, so male and female. And not a mushy kind of love, but a genuine care and respect for others. And all of the things that the Bible teaches. For us Christians, we understand, I think, what I mean when I say that. And so then, if we're behaving that way, you're generally going to get people that recognize that behavior is different and ask, what is it about you that's different? They may not know that you're a Christian. They just recognize there's something about you. So that's what we're striving for. And then I think secondly for me, the other reason besides evangelism is to strengthen our faith.
Right.
So
That's a good point.
yeah. What do you, any points that you want to talk about on that?
Yes. So I believe when one becomes a Christian, many people say that once I became Christian, I had this peace, and Holy Spirit spoke to me to confirm that what I believe is right. So all of us Christians have this, what do you say, confirmation to know what you believe is right.
Yeah.
But it is so good to have these reasons, arguments that when I heard those, it was so, that made even more sense to me. Doesn't it make sense? Like, like you say, strengthening your faith in a way that not only you know it yourself, but you can share it with people clearly.
Yeah.
So that was really...
Yeah, so going from sort of a reformed epistemology, which is the idea that, hey, it's you don't need any further justification as to why you believe beyond the Holy Spirit, into more of a classical apologetic of giving arguments, if you will, or cumulative case. If you don't know what those are, don't worry. You can either look them up or we'll explain them in future videos. So stay tuned for that. So yeah, I think when we're doing this in the sense of strengthening faith, I'm also thinking of oftentimes when I get asked these questions, somebody may raise an issue that I'm not able to answer. And it's sort of nice sometimes to hear another resource or see another resource, read it, whatever it is, where somebody's explaining, giving a good, solid, rational answer to that question, because it strengthens my faith, particularly in my younger years where I wasn't sure how to give rational answers to these questions. And I think for some people, particularly with the way things go online nowadays, that it's nice for them to when somebody's just really hitting hard on their faith and being maybe cruel or mean to them, it's nice to see that there are answers to those questions that are raised. So I think it can be helpful for that reason too. And I know that our brothers and sisters that do a sort of presuppositional apologetic method, they would say that that's what apologetics is really for. And I think that's a good point. So then, let us know what y'all think about that. What is your favorite approach, or what do you think? Is there something we've missed here? Another reason as to why we should study apologetics? Please, put something down in the comment box. So then, who to approach? So this is another interesting, hotly debated topic right now in apologetics, that there is a podcast that I like to listen to. And I won't say who, and this isn't a, what do I want to say? It's not a unique view of this particular podcast, that apologetics really shouldn't be done on the internet. What's your opinion on that?
Well, where are they doing that? Sharing the information?
Yeah, you caught
internet?
Me. So they're sharing, ironically, that podcast is on the internet. And to be fair to these brothers, they acknowledge that, right? That they acknowledge they weren't trying to do what we call special pleading, saying that, oh, we do this, but you shouldn't do it. I think they had in mind chat rooms and stuff like that,
right.
Or maybe Twitter.
I have heard some people say that some people are against social media, internet, but why not use it? Because, more and more people are using it. So there's a right way to use it, I believe, in apologetics, many other things. Like you mentioned earlier, you can start by showing people, representing what you believe in a very positive way by... if your friends post something to express that they're having a hard time, you can always show love. And by doing that, I think it's a great way.
Yeah, you're too young to remember this, but in the United States, and I was very young when this was going on, Christians used to reject the idea of televangelism. Now, I'm talking about like Billy Graham, not some of the bakers and some of the folks that were fraudulently duping people for money, but people who were genuinely using it. And even before that, now this is before my time, radio. They were against Christians using radio, and more recently, just the internet in general.
Now internet.
And now it's the internet, and then it went from the internet in general to social media specifically. So this isn't a new thing by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
that you'll see that, or contemporary Christian music. Does it belong in the church or doesn't it? And that's
it's always changing, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So those types of things aren't new, but it's an interesting question, and I think it does raise a serious point that apologetics can be effective online, but where I think these gentlemen in particular were sort of raising a good point is the idea that if somebody is looking for Cartesian certainty. Now, what I mean by that is Descartes, a famous philosopher, and I think we'd credit him as an epistemologist, wanted to know what he could know for certain. So he started doubting the external world around him until he got to the point where he realized the only thing he could know for certain was that he existed, which is where we get the famous phrase, "I think, therefore I am." It's sort of a loose paraphrase to what he actually said. But the point being that he realized that you could doubt almost the existence of anything. And so, the question became, what can we know for certain? Well, sometimes people want to pose that to Christianity or atheism or other faith-based ideas or anything in general. That, well, you can't tell me for certain that Christianity is true or that God exists. And if that's the kind of person asking the question, then, you can easily reverse the question, well, how do I know you exist?
Yes, if that's what you're going to go by, only thing you know is that you exist, perhaps mathematical formula and scientific, like water is H2O.
Yep.
Other than that, what else can you be certain, as they say it? That is.
Yeah, well, to be honest, you could make somebody doubt their own sanity and all kinds of things, because we could go with the Matrix experiment saying, well, how do we know we're not, minds inside a vat of chemicals being stimulated by an alien, or that we're in fact just ideas and that we're not actually real at all, and that all of this is a construct in some alien being's mind or a dream or whatever. So none of this is really even real, and that the mathematical formulas are a product of this being. Well, don't freak out. Okay, so the good news is we can know for certain. All right, maybe we can talk about it in future videos. Again, if you're interested, comment below. But sometimes people want to pose the question of Christianity or God in that way. How come you can't prove it with absolute certainty, and that's just silly. Well, yeah, okay, but guess what? We can't know most things with the kind of certainty, the criteria that they're asking for. So if that's the case, and that's probably one of the first questions I tend to ask, is what do you mean by prove? What kind of evidence are you willing to accept? Can I use abduction, which is the idea of the best explanation to something? Can I? And we can talk about that also in future videos, and in fact we will. We will get into a whole section of our apologetics on how to use logic in apologetics. But can I pose it that way? That is it the best explanation? Does that work for you? How much evidence do you want?
Mm-hmm.
And if they're willing to accept a certain standard of criteria which is universally accepted, then I would move forward. But if not, I would agree with those that are saying, yeah, it's not a good idea to interact with these folks, because they don't really want to know anything. They just want to object to Christianity in a way that they feel comfortable with their own objection, if that makes sense, to sort of validate it. So I get that. But then, if not the internet, who else can we really interact with? What would you say?
Who else? Well, people in your life that you meet, right? Outside of internet.
Yeah, and this, dumb question, right, Sean?
Yeah.
So this kind of goes back to the first video I did in this subject series, which is the idea that who we can interact with are people that we know in every day-to-day life. So, you may need to be careful with coworkers, but certainly I sometimes go to get my hair cut at a barbershop nearby, and most of the time I do it myself. Yeah, thank you. So, it's not very good. But if you ever wonder why it's so messed up, that's why. But occasionally I take our two older boys there, and we get our hairs cut. And anyway, when we go, the guys in the barbershop love talking about religion and philosophy, and they're not all Christians. But it's cool because it's a place where guys can get together, and gals get their hair cut, and we discuss these topics, and we do it in a place where nobody's getting mad or attacking one another with scissors or
Oh dear.
holding somebody down and shaving their head because of their viewpoint. Nothing like that, right? But it's nice because we've all sort of formed relationships, and that's why I love going there, that I know these guys. So if you think about it, if you say, well, I know people where I work, but where else do I go where I can have dialogue with people where I don't have to worry about getting fired for my beliefs? then that would be my answer, is think about other places where you interact with people on a daily basis. Maybe it's a restaurant or your
Grocery store too. You are pretty good at that.
yeah. I'm a fairly talkative person, if you haven't noticed, and I'm pretty social, and I enjoy conversing with people, and so I just build relationships with folks, and I try to, like if we're at the grocery store, check out with the same folks all the time and build relationships and friendships. A, you can never have too many friends, and B, it really helps then to be able to have somebody to work with, or not work with, but discuss things of faith and religion and these topics.
And you show them you care.
Yeah.
They find you.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, Sean,
Yeah.
you're here.
Yeah, that's it.
So,
Yeah, and there's I know who you're thinking of too. Yeah, there's one particular guy right now that I've been praying for and talking to, and we just have a great time. And I don't force any of my views on these folks. They know my beliefs, and I'm just there for them as a friend. And when they know that and they do go through a critical point in their life, they're going to ask you to pray for them. And then that sort of opens up dialogue and things like that. So I just try to be a friend and try to live out my faith. And I know you're really good at that as well. So yeah, people you know, who to approach. And then necessary skills. So if you haven't picked it up yet, there's probably a few you can, if you think about what we've said already, that might help. What would you say is a necessary skill?
necessary skill?
Yeah.
You mean other than be friendly, that kind of
Boom,
more?
that's first one. Necessary
okay.
skill is actually kindness or being friendly, genuinely caring about people. Remembering, I'm trying to remember the professor we had that used to say, people don't care how much you
which
know
one was it? Which
until
one?
they know how much you care. And one of these days I'm going to give his name on here. I'll
Right.
think about it. And it's going to bother me. I don't want to sit here and think about it or it'll take up too much of the video time. But he used to say, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is so true. And again, I'm not talking about a false humility or a false sense of, just talking to someone to get them to listen to you. I mean, genuinely making friends. Mm-hmm. And that really, really helps. So kindness would be the first one. And then the second one that I can think of off the top of my head is simply an ability to communicate. That's it. At first I thought speech, and I was going to put that in my notes, and I realized, well, no, actually, somebody who can't speak for whatever reason, maybe they're hearing impaired, and so they don't speak, they sign. They can sign to others, they can understand sign language, and absolutely do this as well. There are tons of ways that you can communicate with folks, again, online. So as long as you have the ability to communicate, that's really it. So with that, let's talk about some of these data points. So in the last video, I talked about the idea, I think the criticism leveled at Christianity was that Jesus didn't really exist, the mythical Jesus argument. And among scholarship, I heard, and I was trying to get the data on this, folks. I don't like to make comments and overstate my case. I've heard that the vast majority of scholarship accepts that Christ was a real person. Skeptics. I mean, I'm talking about skeptical scholars. Bart Ehrman, non-Christian scholar on the Bible, New Testament, teaching at, I want to say Duke, one of the North Carolina big schools. He wrote a book on this. Now, he does doubt the veracity of the Bible or how trustworthy it is, and he's written several books on that. But he says that Jesus Christ was a real person. I actually have the book in my library. I'll have to bring it next time we do a video, or maybe I'll put a link down below. But even Bart Ehrman admits and would say, yeah, Jesus Christ was a real person. His followers genuinely believed in him, that he was God's son, and that he died, buried, and rose again from the dead. Now, I need to confirm the last part in the book, but I've heard him say that before, but I want to be real careful. If I'm wrong, forgive me. Put the comment down below. I'm willing to accept that and correct my statement, because I'm going off my memory on that last part. So people will make this argument, but it's not generally held by most scholars today. I mean, there are a few radical ones, but in scholarship, for the most part, they would admit that Jesus Christ was a real person. And part of the reason for that is this data that we have. And so Erika's going to grab her list, and I'm going to use my black book. So with this, all right, I'm not going to give you every little detail in the video. What I'd love for y'all to do is to look up these points. Use trustworthy sources, and also use skeptical sources. There's nothing wrong with that at all, because what you don't want to do is overstate your case. you want to be careful anytime you're going for a resource that it's not stating your case in a way that is making it sound like there's absolute certainty on this point, and then you go and repeat that, and it turns out that that's not the case, because A, you could end up misleading somebody who trusts you, or B, you're just going to have it thrown back in your face when somebody's heard that argument before and they go, oh, that's not right. And so you want to be real careful. We don't want to ever put out false information, and so we need to be real careful with that. So who's the first name you have on your list?
Let me see here. Josephus looks like.
Oh, Josephus. Now, this is
great.
this is probably one of the most famous ones, and the reason why is this, that Josephus, there's suspicion that there is what's known as interpolation in Josephus's account. And the problem with this is it does seem to be bombastic, I don't know if that's the right word, but overly sympathetic to the Christians. And Josephus was not a Christian, he was Jewish, but he didn't agree with the Christians. Mm-hmm. He does affirm in his account that John the Baptist was a real person. I believe he mentions James, the brother of Christ, and does mention Jesus. So we know that those parts were not part of this interpolation, or something that's been added, corrupted, if you will. But there's skepticism on how much of the original account is true. What you have to remember, and I recently saw this on an atheist website, was, you Christians are wrong, and this can't be trusted because of interpolation, and this has been settled for a long time, and you're foolish to believe this. Well, that atheist is overstating their case, because here's the thing, unless that person has some serious skills in language, where they've gone back and done some work in the language that this was originally written in, looked at the originals, and tried to figure that out, we need to be careful. So scholars who have gone back and looked at this have said, and Mike Licona comes to mind. Now, he is a Christian, so you may not like that source, but there are others that are neutral on the position that have said, no, some of these statements that Josephus made can be trusted, as far as the fact that Christ was a real person. And I won't give you any more data points on that one, because I want you guys to go and look it up and know the source, so that when you quote it, if somebody objects to it, you're familiar with these points in the argument. You need to know them. What's the next one you have?
Let's see. What's the next one? Thallus?
Thallus.
Yes.
So we don't have any of Thallus's original writings. What we have is a quotation from, is it Julius Africanus? I don't know if that's in your notes. Let me see here. It should be in mine.
Yes, right.
Yep.
I remember that. Yes,
Julius
exactly right.
Africanus. And so Julius Africanus is quoting Thallus. And what's cool is Thallus, again, is non-sympathetic to Christians. He does not want to agree with what's going on. Now, he is writing about having seen let me see if I can remember, not the blackout, but the eclipse or whatever that happens at Christ's death. And so he's acknowledging that Christ is a real person, that these events that the Bible's recording that have occurred, he's trying to counter them and say, well, there's a reason, but it's not because, of something that the Christians believe. There's some other explanation, but it doesn't even matter why. But in trying to refute the event that he witnessed, at least this eclipse or whatever this is, where the sun goes dark, what he's done is affirmed that the event actually happened for us. And again, Julius Africanus is quoting it. We don't have the original writing from Thallus, so I want to be careful not to overstate our case.
Yes,
so
I found that one interesting.
And both these sources, by the way, are within the first century, so they're contemporary to the events going on. These aren't second, third-hand sources. They're what we call primary. Well, depends on how you want to look at it. There's technically second-hand sources in that they're not Christians, I guess, or it's not the Bible, so they're outside of that. What else do you have? Oh, Marbar Serapion. I always say Sarpion. That's not right.
Yeah, it
Serapion.
looks like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. This was a man, and correct me, that wrote a letter, I think, to his son, and he's talking about Christ, and he doesn't name him specifically. Mm-hmm. I think he mentions that that this great healer and
wise
king was
so
killed by the Jews, and Marbar Serapion was a Jew. So again, not a Christian. So he's not sympathetic in the sense that he's biased, if you will, which is what you tend to hear as an objection to a lot of these points. What's the next one you got?
Eliezer?
Eliezer. So Rabbi Eliezer has some good points. I'm not going to get into too much of it. I think he starts to get out of the first century. I think he's closer to 120 AD. Is that right?
Let's see. He says AD 90.
AD 90. All right, he's still first century, but he's starting to get a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that this is, depending on if at that date, AD 90, I think maybe his birth. So, or that might be the date of the writing. I can't remember with some of these sources. And sometimes it's not clear when you're looking up the scholarship. Just make sure, no matter what, that you're not overstating your case again. Make sure that you're clear. If you don't know, say, I don't know. So who's the Cornelius Tacitus? So Tacitus is a Roman historian who's writing about Christ, and I think he's the one that calls Jesus Christus. Now that's probably just an ignorance to how to refer to him. It could be that it's actually meant to be pejorative. Some speculate that that's the case. But he is a good source as well. He actually is very highly trusted by scholars as to his writings as a historian. So he should be taken very seriously. So look him up. That's another great one. Now, Tacitus is early in the 2nd century, so you see how we're getting out further and further. Now we're going to have to say these are second, third-hand sources. In other words, they're hearing from somebody who witnessed it. And then Pliny the Younger probably is another one on there. He starts talking about, how do I get rid of these Christians who believed in this person of Christ?
Worshipping.
Yeah. And so, you know, for me, when I write in my black book, I'm going to write the name, I'm going to write the date, and then I'm just going to give a brief synopsis of what they said, so that I'm not just telling the person who says Jesus didn't exist, well, here are the sources, go look it up. But I can also quote what they've said. And in that, I can summarize, too, and say, look, this proves, based on these guys, that Jesus was real, that his followers believed that he died, was buried, and rose again from the dead, that certain events happened, including the darkening of the sun or eclipse or whatever occurred here, that there was darkness over the earth, or at least in this region, during the time of Jesus' death, and basically summarize what these people who are non-Christians, extra-biblical sources are saying about the event, so that I can paint a picture for the person who wants to state the case that Jesus wasn't real, that we have these sources. Now, again, does that definitively prove that Jesus Christ is God's Son? No. It simply proves that, I think, it gives the argument for the best explanation of the data that Jesus Christ was a real person. You need more data to get into, I think, to start making some of these other cases an argumentation. So remember, again, not to overstate your case with your evidence. Be careful. Between evidence and proof are different things. We don't want to say that there is proof, but we do want to say that there's a vast amount of evidence. And particularly, there's a lot more evidence for Jesus than some famous figures throughout history that are contemporaneous with this. We may only have one source for certain ones. I don't want to say who, because if I misstate it, then I'm going to confuse somebody. But look it up. That's what the resources are there for, is to help you. Any closing comments?
I think it was great. And yes, I want to encourage you to look up these resources. Write that on your notebook that you're going to carry. It's going to definitely come in handy. Like Sean said, it might not prove that Jesus is God, but it does prove, or explain that he was a real person that existed. So
that's right.
If that's what your friend is asking you, there you go. You can explain that these are non-Christian source that talks about Jesus.
Yeah.
So,
when you start being able to give vast amounts of evidence for some of these points, what you're doing also is you're strengthening the case for the Bible. And as you do that, the stronger a case you make, the more trustworthy it is. Mm-hmm. Well, anything that it says about Jesus, God, and other things, it's more likely that it occurred. So that's actually why I think, for me, I find a lot of this data helpful. So remember, like, comment, and share the video, folks. We really need your help with that, and we love to hear from you. So please do interact with us, and we can't wait to hear from you, and we can't wait to make the next video. Thank you guys so much. God bless, and have a great day.